Hello and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly look at all matters property designed to be of interest to anyone who has an interest in property. And Property Matters is supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and Town and Country Property Auctions, London. Each week we focus on the stories that are making the news and give you help and advice on all matters property. So please don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff wherever you're watching us so that you get notifications of when we go live. And also, of course, don't forget our email address, propertymatterstv@gmail.com. Please do get involved. You can put your comments in the comment section below wherever you're watching us today, and we'd love to have your comments in the show with us live today. Joining us as always on our special anniversary birthday edition, no less, it's Joe Joshi. Good morning, Joe, and happy birthday.
Yes, good morning. 2 birthdays in 2 weeks is quite crazy, isn't it? It's maybe we can make a threesome next week as well and celebrate another one. But Property Matters has a birthday, a first year that we've been on air and in your faces, as they say, for every Sunday morning from 10 to 11. So yeah, it's a great. I mean, I can't believe that year has
gone so quick. Yeah, 18th of October it was, so it's actually officially tomorrow, but this is the birthday show, if you want to call it that. So yeah, it's the 18th was Sunday a year ago, the 18th of October at 10 a.m. So exactly to the year in terms of editions. So and we've been on air, I think, every week, haven't we? Pretty much.
Yeah, without fail, every week.
Yeah, because we did it through Christmas as well.
Yeah. We even help you unwrap your Christmas presents. So yeah, no, we're there. Unfortunately, you're stuck with us, and long may it continue.
Absolutely. And we've got, as I was mentioning a moment ago, we've got a sort of bit of a self-help one this week, really, because we decided to have a look at 20 ways to boost the value of your home and give you those tips. So what are the things that you can do to your property or your investment properties to give them the biggest boost financially in terms of the price? I mean, you could argue in the current marketplace, just leave them alone and they'll escalate in value. But we want to be a bit more proactive than that, clearly, Joe, don't we? And have a look at these. And let's look at the first one straight away. Let's get into it, really. And that is to look at structural issues, because there's no point putting in new kitchens, bathrooms and everything else if you're going to need to underpin because you've got subsidence.
Yeah, so improvement to a home is really quite important, Paul, and I'm glad we're having this discussion, this particular subject. It's quite important to understand the ultimate reason why we value so much and we put so much trust and funds and money and a whole thing into our home is very important. It's very paramount. And because we as in the UK have always put a huge importance on our home, and that doesn't matter to a large extent whether it's a flat or a house or even if you're renting it to some extent, or mostly because people are doing it because they bought it. It's the biggest investment, Paul, that anybody ever makes in their entire life. I mean, okay, you could go and buy yourself a 200 plus Lamborghini or a Ferrari or whatever if you really wanted it, but you can be in that for a short time. But a home is what you're going to spend your life in. It's what you build your life around. It's where you have your children. Everything happens fundamentally in the base and in the foundation of the home, and therefore the foundations just about us as people and our home is just as important as the foundations and the structure of your property, and that's where you got to stay and ask your question. So I always start with standing on the outside, look at the property from the exterior, step back, because to be honest with you, when you have a place, you kind of don't step back. You're rushing out of your car, you've got a handful of shopping, etc. You maybe got the kids around you. You just want to get the key and you get out, and you forget to actually take a stock and look out the outside and say, well, actually, what do I need to do? Because we're always living on the inside, which is the whole idea. We do a lot of things to the inside because that just becomes the norm. But the outside is absolutely the right way to start. Now, you point out structural defects and structural needs that they're doing, and things like subsidence. Now, subsidence and movement of property at some stage is inevitable, and it happens vastly around roads and rail and maybe rivers and waterways, etc. Because there's always a slight movement in the earth that it is built on, so it's always
Mm.
going to adjust a little bit. Perhaps not so much,
Trees is the
further
other one,
away.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Sorry,
but
trees is another one.
yeah, trees. So all of these things are important to understand when you're buying a property, or you're looking at the outside, because those things are gonna um, make the difference on how a property is gonna settle. Now, even if you're buying a brand new property, you will find that a year, 18 months later, you are gonna see hairline cracks in the plaster and things like that coming through. That it also is about the ground settling, because it's brand new, they've created the foundations, and there's going to be a little bit of adjustment for that property to find its own settlement as time goes on. So it's very, very important to understand the structural side of it. Now, most people actually miss that. And the only time it really raises its head is when a surveyor may value it, or maybe an experienced property guy like myself, who's seen this in the 40 years. We can advise and guide to somebody and say, look, that there is some structural issues here, and you may need to get a structural engineer to come in and give you advice and guidance as to what needs doing, if anything at all. And sometimes it's too late. If you have a 200-year-old property, or a really old cottage, that settlement and that cracking is going to be there for a long, long time. But they can be resolved in different ways, and underpinning and getting some structural advice as to how to stabilize that property is equally important to get. So there are differences on who comes to look at these things. You need to have a structural engineer as opposed to structural surveyor. The surveyor will actually give you advice on it as it stands and looks at, but the engineer will start to tell you how we're going to stabilize that property if there is a reason for it to be stabilized. So there are different people for the different jobs that need doing. But once the outside is looked at, of course, you start to step indoors. But even on the outside, there's so much more. In fact, in my opinion, not that that's probably worth a great deal, Paul, but in my opinion, the outside is far more paramount than even the inside is. Because when you're looking for a property and you're looking to buy a property, you are not going to go on the inside before you've actually digested or taken in the outside. So if you're driving, get in your car and close your eyes and imagine you're driving down Acacia Avenue, and you like the outside. You like the way, the style of the homes, you like the road, you like the curb appeal. You're going to go past that and you go, this is a nice area. I wouldn't mind living here. This is what makes it. So that's the first step. If you then go to an area and you drive through it, or you walk through it, or whatever, nowadays people have these little electric mopeds, they whiz through it. You could turn around and say, oh, I don't want to live here. And the reason why they don't want to live here is because from the outside, they've already made the decision that this is not an area they want to be. So it is almost irrelevant for the value of the home what you start to spend on the inside, though it makes a lot of difference. We'll talk about as that goes on today. But the reality is, first impressions are the most important impressions. You know what they say, you never get a second chance to paint a first impression. And so therefore you must have the outside looked at, and maintained, and cleaned and decorated. Not only your own place, but hopefully encourage your neighbors, because that's the key. You might make an effort in Acacia Avenue, which is a row of semi-detached or terrace properties, but your neighbors may not make any effort. So your efforts are going to get wasted until you can actually persuade everybody in that road to start to make an effort. And there are some nice roads. I mean, I've done this for 40 odd years, and I drive down roads, and just, if you've got a customer with you in the car, you're driving around, they just say, well, this is a nice road. I like that. What do you like about it? I like the fact that it's clean. I like the fact it's got a tree line. It's got some greenery around it. People haven't turned their drives into concrete monstrosities. They've actually thought about how they structure it. You know, they haven't got cars on bricks and taken the tires off. And yeah, all of that kind of stuff makes a lot of difference. And then you look at the house, and if someone hasn't actually bothered to look at the house and deal with the outside, it's, it's dismissed. They're just not going to actually bother. So the exterior is important. Structural surveys and structural movement is equally important, because what you don't want to do is start spending money on all the other material things that you could do to the outside, knowing that there is some sort of defect. The problem is this, Paul. The problem is that if you had a traditional brick and tile property, then the chances are you will see some of the movements because it's evident. But over the years, a lot of people have rendered their properties, you know, and there was a time when pebble dashing was done and rendering was done and all sorts of other colors and paints and things people do to them, which is great because it's your home. You should do what you like to do it. But what happens is some of those things then cover the actual issues that may be underneath, and that
Yeah.
is only going to come in clear when you have certain things that don't fit anymore, and that's where you will start saying, for example, you know, you might find that the wooden door is actually down to swelling during the winter period because it swells. But you might actually think it also might be because the property has moved and it's not quite shutting. So what you do is you get the old you know, plane, and you plane the top of the door and you plane the bottom of the door and you push it in and it kind of fits and everybody's happy with that. But you need to, at that point, think a little bit and say to yourself, well, why did that happen? What is it? So it could be that that window frame or that door frame has slightly, I mean, like a smidgen of a millimeter moved, and therefore that door is now becoming tougher to open and shut. It's a simple exercise as that, to be honest with you. You don't need a structural engineer to come in and tell you that. I can tell you that sometimes it's just simple things like that. Now, and again, that may happen on the new modern double glazing UPVC doors. However, I have learned that they do have a little bit of play in those. So you can't always, that has to be a pretty drastic move. But the traditional front door, which was a wooden front door, unfortunately is weather driven. So in the summer, it shrinks because it's nice and warm and everything's great. And you think, oh, well, that's all right. And that's when you see the gap that you've actually now created because of the winter.
Yes. Now you've got a
in,
draft.
in, yeah, in the winter when it didn't shut, you've taken it off and chipped it and planed it or done whatever you think you've done to it, and then in the summer it shrinks and you think, oh, well, that wasn't right because now I've got this gap on there. So now you've got a draft, and that creates another issue to look at. You have to buy draft excluders and get your so things that are involved. So there are a lot of little tips that people, you know, perhaps don't think of, but when you be logical and say, ask yourself, these are the things. But the UPVC doors, the double glazing doors that people tend to sort of use, are probably got a little bit more play in it. So, and because they've got so many nice trims around them, and they look all fancy, you can't always get the reality of it. So that's the thing that you've got to sort of bear in mind when you look at the exterior. So part of the journey about the structural route, the question that we put up there, Paul, is how to understand it and how to actually identify if there is a structural movement. It can be just shown in some of the basic actions that will tell you if there has been a movement. If there has been a movement, then of course it would be advisable to try and get a structural engineer to come and have a look at it and see it. Now I'm going to give you a little tip on that part of it, and the tip is that we all have, to a large extent, buildings insurance. Some people don't because it is an expense that goes out, and some people think, well, I don't need it, so we're all right. But if you look at your buildings insurance, most buildings insurance cover you for land movement, subsidence, and that kind of stuff. So do look at your buildings insurance policy, and if you haven't got one, here's a tip: go and get one. But of course, don't make a claim on it the next day, because they're not that stupid that they're going to think, oh well, the guys take it. You know, they need to know that you've been a policy holder for a number of years, and then subsequently there may have been movement, and if that movement is there, they will. You can call them on their hotline or their direct line or whatever they call it, and you can probably get someone to come out, and that could be paid and covered. That structural engineer's cost could be paid and covered under your buildings insurance policy. So do check that out. And if anybody is in doubt about that, then you know where we are, or you can give us a call or drop us a message, and we'll be happy to help you, guide you through that part. But you don't think, you immediately look at it. Most people look at it. I've done this many a times, and there's so much more I can talk to you about this, where those situations have happened that people haven't actually bothered to look in their own cupboard and their drawer and take out the policy and ask themselves, can I do this? Am I covered for this? And I'm sure you'll get comments from people that actually have done things and never thought that they were actually protected and covered on that. So it is important to check your policy out and make sure, because you know that one point is going to lead to a number of things, Paul. First thing is that you're going to get that movement. Secondly, you've got to get it investigated. And let's say that there is movement, then you've got yourself another huge bill on your hand. And that could be thousands, literally thousands of pounds. So if there was a movement on the property, that was a structural movement, and you wasn't protected through your insurance, then you had to start to doing underpinning and employ engineers and builders and developers and all sorts of people just to try and get that movement settled. You could be looking in 20, 30, 40,000 pounds worth of work that you never actually bargained for. So buildings insurance policies are quite important to check out, and you may be surprised how many other things are covered. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't bother to look at those. So a few tips on the structural side, and of course, I'm sure we will revisit some of that in the questions, no doubt. Paul Allen's going to put to it.
We also say thank you to Michael Holmes, who wrote this article actually in a website, homebuildingandrenovating.com, and these are the tips that they've shared, and they provide us with a pretty thorough agenda for discussion today. So some of the suggestions that they make are: sagging and leaky roofs can be structural, rising damp, cracks in the walls, obviously bowing walls, rotten joists and roof timbers, insect infestation. Missing or broken roof tiles suggest the roof might not be in great shape. Unstable chimney stack and collapsing floor, unlevel floors, all things to look out for from a structural point of view. Moving on to the second one, Joe, and I suppose the next most basic thing is get an opportunity to upgrade the heating system. So looking at the property, and it may not be that you need to, the article suggests, actually replace the whole thing, but maybe add more if the capacity of the boiler can take it, of course, add maybe heated towel rails or additional radiators onto the system if the system's even in a good position. But that's a great thing to look at first. And maybe it's a case, if it's an older property, that we just need to go in with a new, greener system, and that will add real good value to the home.
So, of course, this week it's been announced that by 2035, gas boilers are going to become defunct. These are the titles. Everybody thinks that we are going to go electric, and that is the way forward. So people are going to be looking at new boilers, new systems, new ways of heating their home, and having hot water in the property. You're absolutely right in terms of what you can add in terms of the heating system. and there are a number of things that come to my mind to add to what has been suggested here. And the first thing is that we find that if you're in a winter period, it becomes probably more relevant, Paul, than it does perhaps in the summer period. And that one of the first things is that the gas central heating and radiators through gas central heating provide another thing, and that is drying clothes. So people often will use the radiators and chuck, a damp towel on it, or put their socks and undergarments and all that kind of stuff that goes onto the radiator. And so they feel comfortable and safe in doing that because there is no heating mechanism as such. It's oil filled or water filled radiators that are warm and therefore will feel safe. When you look at that with electric, that is an impossible task to do. Unless the radiators are created in a similar style or fashion as the ones that are up on the wall with that. But there is always a little bit more danger. It always says do not cover these things because obviously there's a certain type of heat that's coming out and it might cause damage, it might cause fire. But more than anything else, what it does cause is damp. And that is a huge thing because most people will find it cold, so they close the windows, there's no circulation, and they've got damp coming off the radiators because the radiators are drying those towels, and subsequently there is moisture that is now going into the place, and all of a sudden, if you look around the windows that you've done that, you find that there's moisture sitting on the windows and creating problems. These are all things that generally create the next problem, unfortunately. So you solve one by saying, well, actually, I've dried the towels and my undergarments are done. But actually, what you've done is also created a damp situation. And that damp situation then goes into creating another problem, mold, etc., that then starts to sort of manifest itself around those areas. Um, Adding towel rails is definitely a good idea because that's exactly what they are. They should be used for, and they could be put in different areas of the building as well. For example, they could be put into utility rooms, which are areas for washing. You actually, it's a designated area to do that. Obviously, maybe an extra one in the bathroom because those bathrooms are set to enjoy the moisture from showering and watering and so forth. What I'm trying to say is isolate it and put the extras into the areas that are already designed to do those things, to have the moisture. They're probably tiled to the brim, to the roof. There's got protective stuff going on. It's probably got vinyl flooring and not carpeting. We've got tiles on the floor, so they're easy to clean and wipe and deal with than perhaps in the living room where you've got a nice carpet, lovely curtains, and then you whack it on the radiator. That is actually going to mess a number of things going forward. So extra radiators, extra towel rails is definitely good. Boiler pressure and time, yes, you've got to check that out. Most boilers, if someone's going to come and sell you a boiler, they will definitely tell you you need a new boiler because you're going to add 2 new radiators. It's not going to take the pressure, it's not going to take the time. That is not always the case, but of course they've got to sell you a new boiler. If you get someone like British Gas come in, that guy is definitely going to say, here's an opportunity for me. So you do need to get a couple of quotes, couple of views. The hardest people right now to find are tradespeople, Paul. So to get a man to come out and talk to you about, your central heating is as highly possible as perhaps William Shatner, who actually at the age of 90 managed to go to the moon or go into space. And whereas you and I are likely not to get a hold of a plumber or a decorator that is going to come in and do that because they are just so busy. So, I was a Star Trek fan from a child, so I obviously can engage with William Shatner's idea to go into space as Captain Kirk. But and as Captain Joshi, it is just not going to work locally to try and make that happen. So I think that there are things you can do, and there are things that you must do in terms of the heating side. But do think about the things that I'm suggesting is to put it into an area that is already set for moisturizing. Bathrooms, utility rooms, maybe an outhouse where you can actually take that. And those things will change the things inside the house. And opening windows is so crucial, yet we spend our life closing windows because it's cold.
I'm not sure about Captain Joshi, more like General Joshi. I think is probably more the rank. Um, they was also saying that actually, there's simple things there as well. For example, sealing drafts around doors and windows, which you mentioned a moment ago, making sure the double glazing's up to scratch and so forth, and that kind of thing. Topic number 3 was: will the garden office add value? So. Apparently, you've got to pay anything from 5,000 to 20,000 for the average small garden office. Mean price is around £12,000. Estate agents estimate that a garden office can add between 5 and 10% to the value of your home. So on a £400,000 home, obviously that can be between 20 and 40 grand. So it does seem to stack up, and of course it's the must-have des res extra at the moment, isn't it?
So during the pandemic, and people working from home and being on furlough and all that kind of stuff, the garden office became the new must-have extra item in your home. And yes, you're right. It can start from as little as £5,000, or perhaps even less, and be as much as £20,000 or £25,000. But I kid you not, when it's cold outside, you'll be running inside, and you must have that correctly built and insulated, and make sure that it is actually a useful garden office. It's not just an aesthetic garden office. By saying to somebody, well, actually, I've got a garden office. Look at my garden office. It's fantastic, isn't it? But the fact that you actually don't go and sit out there because it is freezing is because you haven't done a good job, or whoever's put it up hasn't done a good job. So the question you have to ask yourself is, did I waste £20,000? That may or may not go up in value according to an estate agent, but the reality of it is, if it's not useful, it's not going to be adding anything to it. So anyone that is having a garden office put in or has put in must think about how it is put as a structure. Even though it's cheaper, there is importance of circulation, and there is importance of the type of heating and systems that you put in. Because I don't know if any of you, listeners have actually got a garden office and sat there and the idea was good, and then you find that, now that it's been cold weather for argument's sake, or the temperature hasn't been good, you actually prefer to sit on the kitchen table as opposed to the garden office that you've created, which is now going to become a very nice glorified junk hole storage place, because you don't want to go out there because it's just wet, or it's damp, or it's cold. So I'm not sure that the idea definitely is a good idea, but what I say is, if you can't do it or can't get it done properly, think about the idea, because really all you're doing is making something look aesthetically attractive by saying to someone, I have it, but if you can't use it, then really it's not my point. And there are so many cheap, single skinned shed come garden offices that are created, and they're a good den for the gents to go and disappear and become a good. I mean, the only thing that I've seen a lot of these garden offices become is a little, go-to bar, go-to drummer, kid, put them in there and make as much noise as you like and so forth. They have other usages than perhaps the garden office, because you're not going to sit there long enough. So it is paramount to make sure that you get it structured correctly.
Yeah. Wise advice as always. Next is rewiring and replumbing old houses. So obviously, the older the house, the more relevant this may be. But obviously, you need to have proper RCD electrical safety standards in the house and so on. I'm no electrician myself, but I know that much about it, obviously. But they suggest also that even it might be just adding extra sockets can actually add value to the home. And maybe using more attractive faceplates on those sockets and switches, and maybe updating lighting in the bathroom and adding extractor fans in bathrooms. Those are the kind of things that you can add if you don't need to necessarily rewire, but you can improve what you've got.
So yes, electric points are now a huge issue in more ways than one. And I see this as I travel around. I see this in my own home, and I see this as we see. Why is that, Paul? You ask. Why is that most important? I'll tell you why the answer is because pretty much everything we exist and own and touch needs to be charged up. And there's always a war who's got the charger and which electric point has. And then you have about 30 sockets, 30 gadgets plugged into one particular one because it's in the same zone. So you've got your iPad charger, you've got your iPhone charger, or your extra smartphone, and then your daughter's got hers that they want to do. They've got the TV charger on it. You know in the kitchen you've got the toaster, you've got the griller, you've got this, and then it just goes on. So everything is needs the charging point. One of the cleverest things that are obviously been done and people don't do, and it's only for the sake of maybe another couple of pence or maybe a pound, I don't know how it would be, is that when they do add the sockets, that they can actually now add sockets that actually got the USB point built into the sockets. And so people don't think that little extra. I'm going to go through the trouble of chipping this, wall, adding wires, but I'm just going to add another double socket because that was, you can get that for a couple of quid and that's it. If you just spend a little bit more money and get the right sockets, you can actually add the USB part of it to those things and subsequently can reduce the number of chargers and actually expand the number of chargers in the house because all of a sudden, everywhere you've actually added new power points actually has a USB point and you can, spread the load if you like. But I find that at the moment, a lot of people don't think about those extra bits, and it's actually everything that we touch pretty much is required to charge or needs a charge. And if you've got a family of four and each one of them's got 4 or 5 gadgets, the danger is that you put all the pressure on the one point, and that is not safe. And that's what you've got to think from an electrician's point of view. You could upload it, and all of a sudden, I don't know if you've ever seen when you use your chargers, if you actually go to the charger itself and just touch the charger, it is burning hot, as is your phone when you take it off or whatever. So that load spread around the house is far safer than it is all concentrated in the one place where you are endangering not only your gadgets because they might burn them out, but you might have a fire created because the system is overloaded. So extra power points designed with all of the modern gadgets are paramount in doing how they should be around kitchens and around wherever you are. And I think they will definitely add. And I know that a little thing like that actually now makes people think. So some years back, you may remember that everybody had Cat 5 installations, and that was because all of our smart home needed, touch lighting, central sound system, music system, all of that part of it. And then it was an afterthought, and somebody started to rewire the whole thing. So if you're going to do rewiring or you're going to do restructuring of any sort, then my suggestion would be that you take into account, because once you've chipped it away and had all this work done, you're still going to have these other gadgets. And if you've forgotten to add that, you're going to redo all of that work again, and that means redecorating and so forth and so forth. So, it is important that you think about it. It may be a little extra at the beginning, but in the long term, you will find that it was the right thing to do. And I remember when new developers used to start to put in electric and so forth, eventually we used to say, well, it needs Cat 5 because everybody's going to have a smartphone, they're going to have a point. And then they go, yeah, but we put these extra sockets that are going to have a gadget, but they didn't centralize it. So as time went on, every developer started to run the wires next to the rewiring or the new wiring of a property to make sure that everywhere there was a Cat 5 or Cat 6 or whatever the current requirement is in terms of computers and sort of making sure that the Wi-Fi and the TV and all of those things were able to be connected. So do think very carefully about the type of wiring that is required, but I think definitely smart extra sockets will definitely add value and make a property more sellable.
Next up is Bifold Doors, the other must-have in people's homes these days, costing around £1,200 per linear metre of the overall frame width for a good quality system. Obviously, good spec of glass is required here and ironmongery, but it can add, with the right development, up to 10% onto the value of the property. So not a cheap installation, but a very much desirable one. Certainly gives the appeal to the buyer when they come and see a place with bifolds.
Yes, bifolds are very attractive. They open the garden up into the kitchen, and the kitchen into the garden, and it's kind of quite sexy, and it's funky, and everybody's gonna have a barbecue outside, and it's all excellent. There's no question about it. But I've learned in my journey that people do these things and have them done by people that don't really appreciate the structure. So my tip on that is I'm not going to dampen it, but I'm just going to say to you that make sure that the structure is good and supported correctly before you whack in bifold doors. Go back like they were, and then
have we lost Joe?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, good. Your sound went suddenly. You were freezing. I wondered if you were getting a call. You're okay.
No. It was a pose, but I was trying to do. No, I was joking.
Okay.
So bifold doors, all I say is look at the structure, make sure that the structure of where that's going to go and the people that put in those doors understand that structure. A lot of people will come to you who have no idea of that and say, yeah, we can take this door out, we can take this window out, we'll take that out, and all of a sudden we'll do that. But hence comes sagging. If there is not the appropriate support put in the right place, then the doors might look attractive for the next month or 2 or 3 or maybe a year, but eventually there's going to be a sag in the system, which is going to mean that those doors become sticky and they don't open. But by then, the man's taken his money, the building work is done, and you're now back to square one. So my tip for that always will be that check.
Oh, we're freezing again, Joe. Okay, you're back.
I'm not changing anything on my side, but
okay, you're all right now. Yeah. So check.
Am I back?
Well, yeah, you're back. Yeah.
So okay, so bifold doors is a big space, Paul. That's the reason I'm saying this. It's not one door or one window. It is a whole wall that you are gonna take out and put indoors. Strong message, number one message for me to that. So I stopped freezing on it. Is that make sure that the structure is correct, and if necessary, get someone who knows about building to come in and deal with the structure rather than not. That's key to do that. Okay.
Next one is loft conversions, which typical loft conversion estimate around 500 to 600 pounds per metre squared. But interestingly, and I didn't realise this, Joe, a loft conversion at 500 to 600 per metre squared is around half of what an actual extension would be. So cheaper to go up into the loft than it is to build an extension by 50%. So in terms of adding value, it's a good investment. And the average loft conversion last year was £23,755.
Mm. So you're going to think, everybody's going to think this Mr. Josh is an expert in pretty much everything, but I have got over 40 years of experience in what I'm telling you. And it comes with a lot of painstaking understanding and knowledge. And loft conversions are a fantastic idea. And yes, they are a certain money, but what you have to remember, and most people forget, that to get to the loft, you've got to go through the entire house. And you are actually going to end up spending a lot more money on making sure that the rest of the house now shapes up with the mess that is going to be created to get to the loft in the first place. There is no landing from the moon on this, gentlemen or ladies. No one's going to come in and take the roof off and then convert a new roof from up there. No helicopter is going to land on there. It has only one entrance, and that is through your house. And as you go through your house, everything that you have had nicely decorated and looked after and maintained is going to become an app.
Oh, gone again.
So just take heed of what I'm saying. It is important to have your loft done, but in your calculation, you must take on board the entire mess. So that £23,000 is a good number, but I think you can double that number in order to make sure, because once you've started to do your loft, as you come down, the architraving on all the rooms is going to look different. The color on the doors is going to look different. And the lady of the house, wherever that will be, will tell you that now we need to have, and they've chipped the doors as they've gone up, and they've chipped the architraving, and they've chipped this, and all of that is going to need to be redone. And funny enough, the next thing is going to be the carpet is a mess, and I need to get that carpet sorted, and so forth. So I advised an uncle some years back on this idea, and I told him the figure that it would be, and he actually, if he was on the air, I would bring him on and tell you. He would tell you straight away that the guidance and the advice I gave him and the amount of money that he actually put aside for it was right, because he realized afterwards that all the other rooms in the house started to need doing. So what was a good idea at 20 odd thousand pounds up at the top actually ended up having to have the whole place redecorated and done. It just creates a mess pool. That's what it is. There's nothing how do you get there? That's what I said. It's not gonna, you can't land it at the top. You can't, have a helicopter hoist the roof up and then put it down with a new loft room on it. It does go through the house, and you just got to accept that there is. And I think people think it's not going to happen. We're going to carpet it. We're going to, we're going to be able to secure it. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And people, any builder is going to tell you he's going to do everything to save it. But I can tell you, in real experience, it's going to be a mess. So do allow for that. However, does it add value? Yes, it does. As an end result, why does it add value? I'll tell you why it adds value. Apart from creating the space in the loft now that you and I got useful, funny enough, you've got an entire house that's been redecorated. So of course it looks pretty slick and funky and new, and so it's going to add value. I mean, why not? Lofts themselves do add value, but it's going to be more than the £25,000.
The next one, and I can't wait for this one because this is your favourite one, investing in solar panels, Joe. Your favourite, I know. Apparently, you have to have a south-facing pitch of around 35 degrees, and you have to choose between panels that are photovoltaic, or PV as they're known, which generate electricity from sunlight, and solar thermal panels, which generate heat for domestic hot water cylinders. So you've got a choice of the two. You can either heat just to generate electricity, or you can do it for actually doing the hot water. Your choice at the end of the day. But no figures on whether it adds value, but the suggestion is from being included is that it does add value to the home, and obviously that's going to be increasingly more attractive as we go more greener with our homes, as our new housing minister and minister for levelling up is suggesting.
Yeah. The most ugliest thing that you could ever put on your house is solar panels. And I just can't understand, and I'm sure there are companies that are creating new tiles that will be integrated as part of the solar panel, because that's the only way that I can see myself ever thinking about solar panels. And if you don't have a south-facing house, then obviously it's clear that they're not really going to be effective. Or
Well,
you could have a
you
window.
have to have one panel that slants towards the south, so one of the slopes of your roof has to be southern.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a problem if it's terraced, isn't it?
Mm.
So if you've got a terraced house, well, which part would you want to slant? He's going to probably be down at the end terraced house, which is he's going to say, well, actually, I don't want your ugly solar panel on my house. And so never the twain shall meet. You could probably put it in the garden. So I was going to come to the point of having windmills in the garden, but that would be the next thing that you can actually have at the bottom of your garden, lots of windmills, all sort of churning out the electric. And so it's like everything, it sounds really good, but I just sometimes think, were they awake when they were thinking about this? They just don't have a structured plan. It's the same argument we're getting constantly on electric cars. It's a great idea currently, and yes, lots of people have been really happy because other people have been arguing about petrol and queues and so forth, but you still need certain other elements to get rid of other elements. It doesn't go away. It's the same system. It's just, it sounds really good at this moment in time that that's the way we're going to save the world and be future. I think there's a lot of thought that needs to go. But solar panels can be and are obviously the future. We've got no choice in that. They just need to be a little bit more sympathetic to the structure and the area that we're living in. They obviously need to get a little bit more competitive and provide the electric that we think we're going to need. But ultimately, everything is going to go electric. So I don't know if you have people that drive up and down the motorway, which I'm sure you do. You'll see now there's a lot of solar farms.
Mm.
So what they do is they don't have these ugly panels on their roofs, but they have thousands and thousands and thousands of solar panels stuck in a farm, which obviously is sucking up the heat and the sun and creating electricity to a point, and we're all getting that electric. So it may be that it's prudent to try and understand where that electric's coming from, whether some of that electric is what you can buy, and obviously that makes your contribution towards green electric and green living and so forth. But the reality of it is ugly, it's horrible. I mean, it just puts you right off, and they put it in the wrong place. But of course, the right place, it has to be south. And in the meantime, all of that effort you make in making your house look pretty is taken away in a heartbeat of an ugly solar panel. Because that's what your eyes go to, and that's why I know you brought it up, because I don't like them, and I don't like them. But I think I could like them. I could like them if they were designed with some idea of that it was part of the roof. So in fact, they could integrate the new tiles as part of the panel. You can actually look at it like a little jigsaw puzzle and create them, and then they would be more appreciated to the naked eye. And maybe don't look such an eyesore as they are. But no choice at the moment. They are something that's gonna exist. They are gonna go forward, and they actually don't make sense. I've spoken to a number of solar panel people myself, and listen to what they say. Listen to the jargon. It's not as fantastic as they tell you it's gonna be. It's just that the national marketing media from the government is that we've got to do this. But when it actually comes to signing on the dotted line, I don't think you're getting a better deal than what you're getting from your local electric plug-in. It's just a scheme now rolled out because everybody tells you that that's the right thing to do.
Time is running on, Joe. We're probably going to get another couple in to get us to get the top 10 in today, I think, realistically, because it's fascinating discussion and chatting through. And the next one here is the adding value by decorating, but not the obvious, because clearly if you're going to decorate the room, then that's going to look better and it's going to have more curb appeal, as you say. But some of the things that they're suggesting that you could easily resolve, even with very little skill, without having to get anybody in, for example, is, as you mentioned earlier, those doors and windows that stick, the handle doesn't quite go down, or it's a bit rattly, or there's mouldy sealant around the kitchen worktops and so on, dripping taps, loose tiles, sewer smells for some reason. That may need somebody a bit more experienced to do that. But a broken window or a damaged window frame, squeaky floors and stairs, they often get those. Nailing those down, perhaps cracks in the ceiling and plasterwork, sorting that out, and flooring that's beginning to lift. Those are the sorts of things that can easily be put right by people, and are not necessarily, about putting splashes of paint around the place.
Yes, I mean decorating is a really broad scenario, and it needs to be broken down in the right way, really, as to what decorating is going to make the difference, and what decorating is important, and what decorating is not so important. And it may be that if we're going to be out of time, we could probably bring some of the other 10 points and part of this into another show to be continued, and sort of look at it that way. But it's huge, the decorating, and what is decorating to you and me is not decorating to the client. And yes, those points and tips that are pointed out are all good tips and good points, and they are important. But the problem, like anything else, is when you touch one part of that, it's what else are you going to start to open up, and that's the bit that I would probably want to speak and spend a bit more time on, so that we can try and guide and advise that each time you are looking at one part, you've got to have in mind that there are other consequences that would happen as part. I think decorating in bite-sized pieces is probably a good way of dealing with that. So the first and foremost of decorating, in my mind, has got to be on the outside. There's no question. It's just not even negotiable in my head. That if the front and the area of your property is not appealing, it's irrelevant, because someone is never going to go through that front door and say, oh, that's a great kitchen. But you want to have the value of that great kitchen because they loved coming through the front door in the first place. And then it's a continuous wow factor as you walk around. So decorating on the outside is paramount, and a lot of people forget that. They ignore it, and they spend their time and money extra on extra bathrooms, nice tiles, kitchens, etc., but have no time for the outside. People buy within the first 10 seconds of approaching your drive or your front door. If they're going to buy, they add value and appreciate the price of your property, because they get to that road and they like to live in that road, and they like what they see. They will not worry about the moldy things inside, because people want to change that, put their own stamp on their life. If you bought a house and you like the outside and you like the road and you like the way it is, you go inside, you're going to say, okay, well, now I've bought this, I like it, I'm going to change all these things. So those things are going to change with each personality. Each person that owns it, buys it, are going to put their own personality into that. But for you as a seller, a homeowner, for you to get your best value, to get the right interest on the property, the first part of the decorating process has to start from the outside. And so after having your structure looked at and the rendering looked at, there's little things like sagging guttering outside, and the the dashboards and the windows. Just cleaning the windows, for argument's sake. People have jet washes, just washing the whites of the window. All of a sudden, it looks like a brand new window. It looks like you've done something to it. So there's so much, and so decorating is very broad in that sense, and I think we could probably spend more time on that perhaps next week.
And Windows actually is one of the ones here. Obviously, replacement windows and making sure that they're empathetic and sympathetic to the style of the property. I think that's a given. The last one, I think, because we're running out of time today, is talking about remodeling to add value, and I think this is an interesting one. So, looking at the interior design of the property and maybe doing a simple floor plan of where you might move the walls to make better use of the space, getting rid of communal, well, sort of depending on your lifestyle. So, for example, if you don't need a hallway because you're not great entertainers, you don't have a lot of people coming to visit you, then you don't need such a big a hall. So maybe think about using some of those non-communal spaces in a different way, moving the walls around to suit your lifestyle. It's an interesting topic area, isn't it? And probably worthy of a show all on its own.
Yeah, I mean the inside is just is a minefield, and it's very exciting, and how it's changed. So, we've covered this in bits throughout this last year, especially with pandemic.
Yeah.
And look what it's done. There was times when the Sarah Beanies of the world went out there and took a sledgehammer to every wall going in the house, saying open plan is the way to be. Now you're going to ask them, they say, no, we want to put those walls back in because we need a separate dining room, we need a separate study, we need a utility room. Utility room adds a lot of value to the property. You don't want to have the washing machine in the kitchen. It's huge. And I think we could probably bring that onto either next week's show or another show, and continue that, because I think it is important that people understand their own lifestyle and what is expected in the marketplace now, and have the two marriages worked well in order to do the changes and the remodeling that they want. And the other remodeling always that never looks fantastic is because it creates a space inside, but aesthetically from the outside it looks horrible. So for example, you can have a double-story extension with a flat roof on the side, because it was just cheaper not to put a pitched roof to marry the house that was already there. Sometimes is actually detrimental to the whole extension, because again, if someone doesn't put that little extra and create the difference in the roof and matches the roof in, it just doesn't look nice. It just looks as if like it was an afterthought, and sometimes it's not as attractive to the eye as one would like it to be, to make somebody actually fully appreciate what you have actually done, and that is to create all the extra space inside, and you can see it, but it looks ugly. So I think architects probably are equally at fault on this, because obviously but they're only probably doing it because that's what their customer wants. And my job here is to say to the customer that I know you're going to spend that money, but do think about the whole look. Stand on the opposite side of the road and look back at your home and ask yourself, is this something that you would buy if that's how you did it? So it's very, very important to get these little things right. It's very important that after spending and investing the amount of money that we do in our home, take heed of some of the things that we've talked about. You don't, it's okay, you don't have to, but we're here to try and advise and guide you in the best way.
Well, our time is up, Joe. I think what we'll do, I was always ambitious to try and get through 20 of these in 1 hour, but so I think we'll have a part 2 on this next week and do the other 10. We've done 10 of them, so maybe we'll do the other 10 next week, because I think it's worth revisiting these, isn't it? And talking them through. It's quite interesting, actually, looking at the year. Going back to the 18th of October 2021, our first show was just about 40 minutes long, and now we're struggling to actually stay under an hour. So whether we're just talking too much or we're just finding so much good stuff to talk about, I'll leave that up to the viewer. What do you think?
They're probably going to say he talks too much.
No, but it's all interesting stuff, and thank you for your wisdom, putting you on the spot there with those 10. We'll do the same thing next week, and we'll continue to talk about how best to add value to your home. Thanks ever so much for watching. I hope you found that interesting and useful, and we'll have part 2 of this next week on Property Matters.